Natural gas compression equipment has advanced a lot over the years, and keeping up to date with the design improvements is a must in our industry. It's time to learn more about this topic with one of the most experienced engineers around the CNG sector, Mr. Tim Boyle on the NGV World podcast. Hello everyone and a very warm welcome to the NGV World podcast. I'm your host Ricardo Carmona, and before we start with this rebroadcast episode from last year, let me tell you that I've published very recently on my website the NGV Professionals Board. So many companies around the industry can find professionals from many different countries that are really interested in new job opportunities. That is really important if you're looking for talent. If your company from the NGV industry, any realm, if you're trying to find any person from design, from conversions maybe, or maybe marketing or sales, give it a try, give it a go, and go to ricardocarmona.io/board and check it out. Check all the professionals that are looking actively for a job. Many people on the board is people that got laid off because of the COVID-19 crisis, and we can help them. Also, if you're looking for that job opportunity yourself, go to ricardocarmona.io/jobs and sign up. It could be your chance to get in front of many NGV companies. And now, let's go with the main part of the show. And don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app. With you, Mr. Tim Boyle. Enjoy! Hello everyone and welcome to the NGV World podcast. Our guest today is Mr. Tim Boyle. He is the Director of International Sales and Business Development at Angi Energy System. Welcome to the podcast, Tim.
Thank you, Ricardo. Appreciate you having me on.
Thank you very much, Tim. I'm really glad that you could join us for this opportunity. And so you mentioned before, you are a really passionate person for natural gas vehicles, and it's a really pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Just wanted to know a little bit better about when did you get into the industry, and tell me a little bit of how did the industry look like at that point.
I started in the NGV business in 1976. I started as president of a compression company in Cleveland, Ohio. And one of our largest customers was East Ohio Gas. And from servicing their NGV compression needs, we were exposed to NGV vehicles, and the rest is history. I've been driving an NGV since 1983.
Okay, that's a lot of time. And at that point where you were actually pioneering in this area, what do you think there was the hustle or the different hurdles that you had to overcome, for example, in putting a new CNG station together?
At that time, it was really early, and trying to figure out the technology, the best technology to fill a vehicle was the challenge. And we were doing it in the back lots of gas companies. So codes and standards weren't the issue like they are today. We were just trying things, staying safe, and filling vehicles.
Yeah, and that's an interesting topic, Tim, standards. Because in many times, for example, in many countries, for example in Mexico, these standards have become a way to, I think, over-regulate and not letting the technology actually develop at a good rate. But in other cases, I mean, in your case where you are pioneering, the lack of an standard might play in a different sense. But what do you think it's the right point or the right equilibrium that you had to have for the standards development with all your experience?
At this point in time, the codes and standards have been established all over the world. The best thing we can do in this industry is harmonize those standards. Learn from the people that have come before.
Yeah, it. I think that as I was mentioning you one time we were talking, the place that Mexico is right now, it's kind of interesting because the standards are there, but maybe some disasters or things that have happened with, for example, LPG or other fuels, have put a sense of alert for many authorities, and at this point, it's being over-regulated. For example, for CNG stations, where the the forbidding they're forbidding actually before regulating and trying to be helpful with the safety standards and stuff.
Yeah, the fear of unknown, it does result in that. Okay, when you have 25 years of a very good safety record, one of the best safety records in any type of fueling, um, you want to stand on those codes and standards, and that's why I've been suggesting in Mexico that they join CSA, which is driving Canada and the USA to harmonize standards, which we have. So they're developing the NGV1, the NGV2, the NGV3 and 4 codes. Mexico should get on board.
All right, and in the United States case, was that association one of the triggers that helped increase the exposure of authorities in that case?
Uh, in the United States, it's our fire code, the NFPA 52, that defines safety. And then we supplement that with the NGV codes that now CSA are driving. AGA, the American Gas Association, started all this work in the late 80s.
That's a really good recommendation. I will let our association try to suggest that. Thank you very much, Tim. Tim, then you got actually to work, that the opportunity to start working with Angi, and we as an industry we have a lot of understanding of what REL compressors mean. Uh, what do you think in that regard? Talking about the equipment, what do you think makes the Angi compressors different to its competitors?
Uh, our core business is NGV fueling equipment. So producing high quality turnkey solutions. So manufacturing a compressor package with the aerial compressor, manufacturing dispensers, dryers, valve panels, controls, station monitoring. We're able to take a holistic look at designing and optimizing stations that both fit for customer fueling needs and using the latest fueling technology. So it's a combination of all of that gives Angi its difference.
That's great. And I think that you guys have a lot of, let's say, you give a lot of value to customer service. And tell us a little bit about, well, maybe with a story, with a quick story. What do you think? What do you think is the value of putting a
Uh,
good customer service?
uh, Customer service is number one priority. It has to be. And our culture is to help our customers, potential customers, to be successful in serving their NGV customers. It's the only way to grow the market. You asked about a quick story. Just recently in Mexico, we had a customer with existing equipment that was looking to have a study on OPEX, operating conditions, the cost between us and a competitor. And as we were able to show in the study, we could have a substantial savings over our competitor. But we did point out that the customer, if they would install a dryer in front of their compressors, they could cut their current OPEX, which they did by 17%. So it kind of hurt our comparison, but it helped the customer. And we need our customers to be efficient, to be able to deliver a good product at a good price, and just to grow the market. That's the only way that we can do it.
That's a really good story. I mean, it gives us a clear impression of the Angi approach, actually, and I think it's really helpful for us or anyone in the audience as customers to have a great hand to be supportive when you need it. That thing, it's a really good thing. And tell me a little bit. Let's talk about Tim. Let's talk about that industry evolution of the compressed natural gas. And tell us a little bit about some aspects that you think have made the difference from the point where we started seeing different CNG stations, maybe different standards, and how do we get until the current or the common place that we are here, and what type of dispensers, type of equipment? What do you think have been several steps regarding the compression and dispense equipment that you can mention right now?
Sure. Very early on, we recognized temperature compensation was probably the number one impediment to filling vehicles. So in the early stages, we would fill a vehicle to a fill pressure, the vehicle would drive down the road, and the gas gauge would drop dramatically. Okay. The first compensations back then were based solely on temperature change and on Boyle's law effect on gas pressures. And I do claim him as a relative. We accomplished this by a dome load technology that we borrowed from scuba tank filling, which was simply a cylinder filled with gas at 21C or 70F to fill pressure, and use this pressure as a spring to close the filling valve. So this gas cylinder would change pressure as temperature would go up and down, giving the vehicle a fuller fill without overfilling it.
Oh, that's an interesting idea. I haven't thought of that. And do you think that idea was developed since around what year?
We were doing that in the early 80s. And then I would say in the 1990s, we started to go to electronic dispensing, and lots of changes over the years, from just having simple program that would up the target pressures, and that's the key to filling the vehicle. What is the target pressure in the vehicle?
Yeah, and I heard from a little bit about what are the inputs that you take into consideration. For those that maybe haven't heard of temperature compensation, can you explain a little bit of what factors you consider in your dispensers to calculate that target pressure, and how do you take it into place?
Yes, and there are two algorithms out there now The, and the first character is what I just explained before, the ambient temperature. Okay. The second thing is the temperature inside the vehicle tank. So we call that the heated compression. Okay, so we temperature compensate for the heated compression tables, which we know. Okay. Um, so right now there's basically two developed algorithms. The GTI algorithm, which is a gas research institute, and the Angi algorithm. Now with our dispensers, customers can choose either algorithm. Okay, and those algorithms will set the target, like I said, based on the ambient temperature and based on the heated compression. The difference in the Angi algorithm, we also calculate a CV factor. What a CV factor is the restrictions that we may have in vehicle piping, valves, things like that. So we can predict what the pressure is in the vehicle tank versus what it actually is at the dispenser, giving a fuller flow.
That's great. Yeah, I guess that will actually give you that Angi algorithm with that calculation of CV will give you a better, let's say, maybe an increase in natural gas going into the amount of natural gas going into the unit, or actually it will keep it safer for maybe to stop in any situation. It will give you a more exact value. What's the difference in the result?
It's giving you more gas per fill, and that's the issue. Range. We need these vehicles to be able to drive all day in the case of a transit bus, in the case of a refuse garbage truck. You don't want him coming back and forth, filling 3 times a day. We want to fill him as full as we can to be able to do his job.
And that brings me to a second question regarding the evolution, and it's about filling pressure. And why didn't you take us to the point where the industry was actually trying to define a working pressure for the cylinders? What were the considerations at that point, and how did we get to the standards that we have right now with 200 and 250 as the main pillars of the natural gas industry?
To go way back, our first fills were 2400 psi, or about maybe 180 bar, and then we quickly went to 200 bar, and that was with wrapping the vehicle tanks with fiberglass. So we now had availability of a stronger tank. And as the tank technology increased, 250 bar became the standard in the U.S. And the reason being is smaller tanks, lighter tanks, and longer range.
Why do you think that the industry it's not working at a single pressure? I mean, why do we have both pressures, 200 bar or 250 as different options? I mean, why didn't at that time didn't get standardized?
Basically because of the availability of and cost of vehicle cylinders. So for example, the NGV codes have 3 pressures. Okay, the evolution of those pressures in the United States, you only have 1. It's 250 bar. Okay, but many places around the world have 200 bar, and I think just the economics for smaller vehicles push it. Okay, for the larger vehicles, 250 bar. Everybody's going that direction, and it will be the right filling pressure. For taxis, smaller vehicles, 200 bar is okay. So it's probably going to stick around for a while.
Yeah, I will have thought that maybe with a single pressure, let's say 250 for everyone, even smaller cars, might do the trick for the whole industry and the
It
economics.
is the right answer.
Maybe it could be, but in that case, I mean, in Mexico we have an industry that really delayed its start in for so many years, and right now it's seeing an amazing growth, and more heavy duty units are being brought into the country, and I think it's a great moment for everyone to start taking a deeper look and into the working pressure into having 250 bar as a regular
Absolutely.
standard, and that will be great.
I've been working in Mexico for about 25 years. My first station was built, and that was 200 bar. And now we're building both 200 and 250. And if somebody asked me to recommend, if I was the emperor, 250 bar and do it right, do it the proper way and safe way, and let's go build the market.
Yeah, that's a really great recommendation, and we hopefully will be working very soon with those compression units. And what do you think about that part of that I mentioned about the compression equipment and maybe some innovation in that regard? I have only been in the industry from mid 2000s, and from that point to now, actually the improvements or technology improvement have been maybe all of them or most of them regarding let's say the electronics, the new applications of SCADA systems, or having the possibility to track your equipment. But in the actual mechanical part and improvement in that regard, what do you think are the main topics that were worth mention, or some things that are about to come?
I have to tell you, the compressors are essentially the same thing they were back when I first started. The biggest improvements have been in materials, okay? And most compressor manufacturers have taken advantage of that, especially in ring composite. We're getting much longer life in rings. Valve materials, which the steel that's being used in the discs and the springs are lasting much longer than they used to. But the basic design of the compressors, they're still the same.
Yeah, and I've been following a lot of with a new technology of compression that I mentioned in one of the Hot Fuels um, expositions or exhibitions that were going maybe a couple years ago, and I mentioned about the Carnot cycle compression. Have you heard about those compressors, and maybe if we could see some development in the futures for that technology and that type of compression that actually it's like a rotation uh, approach to the compression?
There are several different kinds of compression that are being used today, whether it's rotary vane, rotary screw, liquid ring, um, that all have potential. And it comes down to efficiency and can you build them, you know, to cheaper or more economical, not cheaper, but more economical. The, the, the physics hasn't changed. And there are lots of types of compressors. In my opinion, I think double acting recips for this market is the right piece.
Yeah, yeah, that's the one that we almost most often are exposed to. And Tim, let's talk a little bit about some. I wanted to share. I wanted you to share with us a little bit more of maybe some design tips for those in the audience that are actually growing the NGV market or the NGV stations at their different locations. Would you consider maybe sharing some tips about the design of the stations, or maybe how not to make some common mistakes that you have seen in your trajectory?
Sure. First, one thing that many people fight us on is dryers. I believe all stations should have some sort of conditioning equipment. And the reason I say that is gas composition is variable. Okay. Typically, dryers are used, or people think they should be used, only to pull water out of the gas, water vapor. But it also serves to help with other elements in natural gas that may be absorbed in an absorption dryer, so whether it be carbon or others. So it really becomes an insurance policy. And we have seen in my first example that I gave you in Mexico, that dryer was able to lower operating costs. It wasn't needed to enhance fueling. For example, we cannot handle any water in fueling or you'll freeze up. But there are other. It helps improve wear items such as valves, seals, ring life. So that would be the first one that I would recommend.
I'm looking at the quality natural gas quality standard in Mexico, and they have they don't have it in pounds here, but they have 110 milligrams per cubic meter. Well, at the top, the maximum amount of moisture, actually, right? So that
vapor. Those are grains of vapor that can actually create H2O. Okay.
And in that regard, I mean, with this, let's say let's call it like this, with the certificate in my hands that actually the moisture levels are below the standard, with that amount of natural gas, of liquids or water being certified that we don't have it in the flow or the stream, isn't that enough? I mean, in any case, doesn't that account as a certificate that the moisture or maybe some other components are being brought into the stream?
Absolutely. And there are places that operate without dryers and operate fine for many years. But there's also systems in those same areas that have a problem. Okay? After you have a problem, it's very costly. As I said, it's an insurance policy in those situations.
Yeah, an insurance policy, and in the second case, you have a savings, right? So even with that, it works more for the progress of the NGV station. That's really good.
And in those situations, you can go to a less expensive dryer without a regen capability, and it's just a big filter. It's a different type of filter in front of your station.
Sounds really good. And you were telling me about a second suggestion.
Yeah, pipe sizing. Biggest mistake I see made. Okay, proper size, both in the low pressure and the high pressure, is critical to the flow performance of any station. So care should be taken to consider pressure drop calculations and also future growth when designing that pipe system. It's a lot cheaper to do it than one then change it as the station grows.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good topic to have in mind while designing the station, and you think that with having the proper care with the speed of the flow, and having that below the regular, I believe it's 25 meter per second threshold, that would do the trick, or you will consider that going even farther of what it's demanded by the standards, it's a good recommendation, having like a security factor, let's say.
Yeah, I'm more concerned with having the proper material for flow. Speed doesn't concern me as much. Okay, I know it's there's a number there, and most of the time we're below that number. But give you an example, when you're flowing direct from a high volume of storage,
Yeah.
and the vehicle is very low pressure when it comes in, you're going to get high velocities. And those velocities will slow down during the fill at the higher pressure, where you want to take the most consideration. Okay, so properly sizing the pipe and taking a look at the design is critical. For example, you have to consider your fueling strategy. You know, how many vehicles you are trying to fill, how many hoses are active, and what are you going to do in 1 hour? So many stations are designed the one size fits all mentality, and it doesn't allow for optimization, control of cost, getting vehicles in and out. We call first in, first out. Many times stations are designed and a fellow will be filling up, he's half full, another guy hooks up, he has to wait for him to catch up. So it creates lines, it creates congestion. So looking at your design up front can negate a lot of those problems.
Thanks. That's are some interesting tips. Would you add another one to those suggestions for your stations?
Yeah, make them Angi. No, I'm teasing. Yeah, and space. Space is a hard thing sometimes, especially in major cities like LA, Mexico City. Um, we can build up, we can build over canopies, but you need service space, and don't try and shoehorn it in. And always look to the future growth.
Yeah. Most for those in here in this program in Mexico, that's one of the things to consider, the growth, and one of the things that we consider actually in our company, having present that this is just starting for many of us in different latitudes. I mean, the India market, it's growing rapidly, and it's kind of having that thought in consideration every time. It should work great. And Tim, tell me a little bit about. I saw in different publications of your company at Angi that you've been working really closely with biogas or biomethane, and could you tell us a little bit about first to starting this topic about how are the developments of biogas moving forward in the United States?
RNG it is around the world. Okay, in fact, some of our work right now is based upon what Europe has done for waste to energy technology. Okay, so the cleanup technologies are pretty far advanced, and we're going out and getting those and using them. It really is a policy-based thing in the U.S. right now. So RNG it's such a best in class fuel. Very strong position if you want to consider the environment. It's renewable, it's available. When used with a heavy duty near zero engine, the emissions are untouchable. We're far better than electric. Okay. In California, ARB ranks it as the lowest carbon intensive fuel. Okay. It's much cheaper and comes with engine technology unlike hydrogen or even electric.
That selling point of closing the loop from our waste to our fuel, it's kind of a great thing to let's say to take advantage of. And what products in this line has Angi developed oriented specifically to R&D, or have you developed some products or product line for that?
Yes, but it's mainly again what's needed, and there's low pressure compression as well as high pressure compression. So we've used our time proven NGV product lines, especially our NG 300, to bear on this marketplace. So it depends on what you're doing. So if we're just gathering gas from dairy, very low pressure, we're using rotary screw type compressors. They're boosters, okay? Built very similar to NGV product, but not the high pressure type of product. So with 30 years of experience designing flexible compression system, we can handle the whole range of compression that RNG needs, whether it needs the very first compression, very low pressure, to get it into, whether it's filtration, whether it's aiming, whether it's a water bath, whether it's membrane. We can take that gas and then boost it up to either put it back in a pressure line or build it up to a higher pressure to fill trailers to take to market.
All right, that's great. And have you spotted a trend actually in that sense? I mean, for example, in Mexico, I believe there is only one active, how do you say that, like biodigester or
Correct.
generator
Digesters.
digesters for natural renewable natural gas working. And how have you seen the, let's say, the request for your products or your services in that regard specifically?
Yeah, the digesters, to understand how they work, you can take animal waste, agriculture waste, you put it in a digester, you've got some little bugs that'll eat up that food, if you want to call it, and turn it into methane gas. Okay, now that gas has got a lot of components to it. It's actually very low in methane. So it needs to be filtered, cleaned up to be able to be used. It's, and it depends on where you are. If you have a digester that's very near a pipeline, then we're just boosting it into that pipeline and using it. If it's, for example, dairy is a very good source of methane, but they're in the middle of no place. not in the middle of Monterey or Mexico City or LA. So what we do is we gather from several of those dairy projects and take that gas, put it into a trailer, and take it to market. Whether we take it to a decant site to put in the pipeline or take it to a daughter station to put it into vehicles.
And have you spotted a trend in these recent years, let's say, with the increase of new digesters and people interested in taking advantage of RNG, or have that been steady in the last years?
Like I said before, it's kind of been driven at first by Europe, basically because of the cost of their energy. So they were able to go waste to energy uh, purely on availability and energy need. In the U.S., it's driven by government mandates, for example, on power. It has a certain percentage of renewables they need to use. And then carbon credits, RNG credits. So there's a subsidy that makes it goes.
Yeah, there's an incentive culture more uh, developed for policies, through policies in that regard. That's really interesting.
There'll be a day when it's not as cheap. Right now, it's so cheap to get methane out of the ground that it's the best source. The cleanest source, as we said before, would be to use biogas. And the good thing about it is biogas is actually hydrogen. We'll be able to make biogas cheaper than we can strip hydrogen. So it really is CNG. It really is a hydrogen fuel.
Yeah. I was heard. You have to take into account for hydrogen the amount of energy required to extract it actually, and then being able to serve that. And in the case of RNG, that's one of the challenges that separates you from the natural gas extracted from the ground. And but I also believe that in the next coming years it will be a lot cheaper and a lot more present, right? It's going to be
Absolutely.
ubiquitous to see that fuel, and hopefully the incentives will be there, and hopefully Mexico in that regard will grow uh, in that sense.
There sure is a lot of interest, and it's well founded.
And Tim, let's talk a little bit about market trends and what do you think it's the main continent where natural gas is making a differences and it's growing at a really fast rate, and what could we expect from those trends at this moment?
There are many good programs around the world, Europe, Asia, South America, but the most positive trend is in North America. Canada, Mexico, and the USA are leading the efforts to use the best NGV technologies, which will give us the best chance overall for success and deep market penetration.
That's an interesting angle because what you see right now from the numbers, let's say, and you see the numbers that India, for example, can showcase right now, and China can,
Without a doubt.
those kind of overwhelm you. But that's an interesting angle that North America actually it's increasing at a rate that maybe for someone that is looking at the global market has go we say like down the table and you don't actually see it. What can you comment this about?
Yeah, so for example, the most vehicles in the world are in Iran, actually by percentage. And it's driven by them using something they don't need refined. Um, India, the last number I saw, they expect to build over 4,000 stations in the next 10 some years. That might be optimistic, but they're not actually growing in technology. Okay, what they're doing is displacing fuel. Their vehicles aren't as clean as they need to be. Okay, if we really want to do this, is to have an alternative fuel that helps clean up the climate, then we need to do better, not just numbers.
Yeah, that's a great angle. And Tim, since just a few years or maybe a few months, you guys, I think that you guys you did it like the premiere with an integrated compression unit concept. Could you talk a little bit to us with regarding that solution, and maybe some anecdote of what what were the customer needs for you to design that kind of solution for integrated compression units?
Yeah, integrating NGVs has been since Angi started. It's not a new concept. But integrated solutions are what you just said. They're driven by customer needs. So our recent Fleet Pro offering is targeted to a growing small volume station market. Many customers have converted their large fleets to CNG. They're looking for quick deploy, something they can quickly deploy, low construction cost option for their smaller satellite fleets. So at the same time, that Fleet Pro can also be used as a starter station and then expand as the fleet expands. So it really was targeted for two markets.
Okay, and that's what you call the Fleet Pro solution.
Correct.
All right, I will leave the link in the show notes for those of you that want to explore more about this solution, maybe the brochure and the technical information, because I found it really interesting and worth to mention here, Tim.
Perfect. As you asked about one of the customer needs, a good example for this product is waste management. They're the largest garbage truck refuse CNG fleet in the world. They've done a lot of their larger stations and now are looking to deploy the Fleet Pro to their smaller sites.
Oh, so that solves the problem, for example, because the waste management programs are really famous. For to me, those are being present a lot, and it's undeniable one the largest fleet for waste management. And that's interesting because actually I would thought that maybe all their needs were covered for, let's say, conventional CNG stations around here and there, but actually they're not, and they're looking into this kind of solution to solve the problems with isolated and smaller fleets. Is that correct?
Yes, their target is 100% CNG flow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really great. And Tim, let's talk about. Let's start wrapping this interview up, and tell me a little bit of where do you see in the company, where do you see Angi in the next 5 years?
I fully expect Angi to continue its role as leader in the CNG fueling industry by continuing to optimize state-of-the-art fueling solutions to its customers.
Yeah, so you expect the continuous growth, and we would hopefully be watching what Angi can bring for the next years. And one interesting question I ask a lot, Tim, if you could change anything in the CNG industry as it is right now, what would you do and where would you do it?
The first, wake up people to the fact that CNG is the best alternative fuel for deployment today. CNG offers the best opportunity for us to affect clean air over any other alternative that you can find today, and we can do it quickly. And not to mention, it saves money for the consumers. Every other alternative fuel costs more money to the end user. And then secondly, harmonize the codes and standards. Again.
Yeah. Those two topics are really good, and one, the changing the perceptions, or let's say increasing the awareness in a massive level would be an interesting time to live, and having that put into place and with all regulations standardized, and that will be really amazing.
And the world needs it now.
Yeah, the world needs it now. That's correct. And Tim, tell me a little bit of maybe the most important lesson that the company has taught to you.
Relentless pursuit in serving the industry. Angie's probably the oldest company serving the CNG industry that's still in business today. Not too many faces as old as mine, but we're still serving the industry with solution-based products and designs.
Yeah, that's a great lesson. And Tim, do you have any favorite story? I don't know, through your experience. I mean, through the many years of experience you have, any interesting story that you would like to share with you regarding the industry or the business?
Too many to recount. The most satisfying are all the great people that I've met and I can now count as my friends. No matter whether it's competitors, no matter whether it's customers, and other stakeholders in the industry. It's been great.
Yeah, it's great to have people with your background in the industry, and having the opportunity for you to share that. It's really awesome, Tim. Would you to wrap up finally? Would you tell us a little bit of maybe a couple interesting trend, one or two interesting trends that we should, as an industry, we should be looking for, or we should be following closely in the next months or years?
I look at the price of oil a barrel every day. It just reminds me that we must sell a value proposition for our customers. But the other one we just talked about, sustainability trends. Sustainability will eventually be the driving force for all of this. So it's real important to keep our eye on that ball.
That's a great suggestion, and one that everyone in the industry should be looking for. And I have it on in my mind I think that every day, every single week, I'm thinking about how we are growing. For example, here in Mexico, the natural gas industry, and how we should put sustainability into the conversation every time, and how we could move forward, because it's gonna get the time is gonna get here where it must be because of policies implementations, or because we actually need it as people living in this only planet, that we should be using our renewable natural gas sources, and all those related topics.
Our Earth makes methane every day. The best alternative is to capture it and use it in vehicles. I don't care if it comes from the bottom of the ocean, from the ground, from renewable sources.
What a great way to end the podcast, Tim. What a great reflection. And let's. You have any final words to the listeners, or can you tell us if we want to the listeners, if they want to work with you guys, where they can find you and where they can locate you online?
Yeah, you can get me at LinkedIn. You can get me at Angi.com. Or my email is tboyle at angienergy.com. My final words, stay passionate. NGVs are electric vehicles. We use electricity to compress the gas for a usable form. NGVs are hydrogen vehicles. There's 4 hydrogen atoms to 1 carbon atom in methane. And if you're in the industry, drive an NGV. Practice what you preach, and we can do this together.
Oh man, those were like 4 really valuable tips, Tim, in one simple sentences. It's really been a pleasure to have this conversation with you, and having a little bit of that testimony of what it means to be really passionate about the product, about the impact that we're having in the society. It's great to find you. I will leave the link for your email and contact information on the podcast notes. I will invite you guys in the audience to subscribe to the podcast, and keep listening these great personalities that we are interviewing, and and we'll see you in the next time. Thank you very much, Tim.
Thank you, Ricardo. Good job.
Take care. If you got this far on the episode, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app and don't miss out on any weekly episode. So, see you next week.